I'm so glad to be here today with all of you, and we have such an awesome team of founders here that have a lot of experience from starting a company, from scaling the team and scaling revenues as well, which is always very good. I work in early stage, so sometimes it takes a little while to start to scale the revenues. They have worked with international investors and they gained a lot of experience. So we are going to talk about the executive team, coming from the founding team and to the executive team. I would like to introduce Kasper Hulthin. He has co-founded Podio that was acquired by Citrix, worked there for a few years until he co-founded Peakon that also was acquired by another company called Workday in 2021 for $700 million. He is now with Future 5, investing in companies and doing some good. Ida Tin is the co-founder and now chairwoman of the period and pregnancy tracker, Clue. She built the company from 0 to 11 million users, active users, and they are headquartered in Berlin and have investors from around the world. Chris Bach is the co-founder and chief strategy and creative officer at Netlify, a web development platform that has over 4 million active developers. So welcome, all of you. When we met to prepare this panel, we thought it would be nice to be a little bit practical. So we thought to split the session and talk about finding talent, attracting top talent to the executive team, and how to make them successful. But what is one of the most important things is to know what you're looking for, and that's where we are going to start. So Kasper, building a company from scratch, 2 times successfully to an exit. What are the most important competencies that you see and qualities in the co-founding team, and how do you develop the leadership team from there?
Good morning, everyone. I think there's 3 things for me in putting founder teams together. The first thing is shared ambition. Second one is shared values. And third one is that you have a complementary skill set. So unfolding them a little bit, I think on the values part, it sounds a little bit fluffy, but it's typically where things also go sour when you have. So the trouble sometimes is to figure that out up front. Like if we were to start something together, how do we figure that out? So I think at least what we've tried to do is to set some relatively clear operating mechanisms. We'll probably come back to that later, but I think there's a lot of communication, a lot of things you can do around that. Second one around ambition, I mean, obviously you can have differences in terms of strategy or whatever, but differences in how far or what is the ambition. If one guy wants to make a local little company, the other one wants to build a unicorn, that doesn't work. And then obviously the complementary skill sets. So when we started Peakon, there was a marketing guy, a tech guy, and a product guy, and so forth. So we more or less had a full management team. And I think it's important that you add something complementary to that as well, right? So
Definitely, totally agree with that. Ida, I would like to ask you, when do companies or startups really need to add the C-level to the team? When is the right time?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say no matter what title you give people, try to get the best you can possibly get. So aim high, and maybe some people, they will be like, I don't want your job if you can't give me a C title. And it can be really tempting to give C titles out early. But the organization is going to change faster and more than you think. So you need to be able to keep hiring people that are even better than the best ones you can find today. And if the C level is taken, you're going to have some pretty nasty conversation to hire over the C level that you just hired last year. So go for VP for as long as you can stretch it. It's probably a good sign. Like if you have VPs in your organization, then maybe go for the C level. But if you don't have VPs yet, then probably don't go straight for C.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I would say have really open conversations with people about the titles and help them understand as well that this organization is going to change and there's going to have to be some flexibility. And if you hire them as a VP, you can say, you know, maybe you'll become a C-level, or maybe not. Like, we don't know yet. Like, we cannot know. Yeah.
That's a very good point. Chris Bach, you relocated to San Francisco to build your team. What were you looking for in terms of values in the team? And did you have any challenges blending your Danish values with the Silicon Valley mentality?
Yeah, I think when we started, we came out of private beta 8 years ago and started building the team 7 years ago. And I think in Silicon Valley, the values of a company were very articulated and very much more operational than I was used to. So there was a lot of good learnings there. But I think when you are building that executive team, what's important is that this person, you might get them in to build an org. There might be an org already, so you want to make sure it's a match there. But no matter what, they're going to be part of an executive team, and that team comes first. And you have to make sure that they are fit, right? And that they will fit into the values as well. And you want to interview for that. The way we think about it is basically, as is talked about in the advantage, this idea that you have to be result-focused as a business. It is a business at the end of the day. But you can only be result-focused if you find in your executive team and all the way down accountability. There's no accountability if there's no commitment. But you'll never get true commitment without people's buy-in, which comes from weigh-in, right? You want to talk to people and get their opinions before, and explain why you're making the decision before you're going to get that true commitment to it. However, that will only happen in a company where you have vulnerability-based trust. And so what that means is that you have a culture where it's not politicized, where you don't have a manager that made a decision or they said their opinion out loud and now they can't afford to change their mind because they fear it'll be politicized and used against them, right? Because in a company like that, very quickly, you'll have employees that will say, you know, I'm not going to voice my opinion because it doesn't matter. Now the best idea doesn't travel, right? And now you end up with a company that has worse outcomes as a result of it because it's just that whoever thought of this, was decision maker, was also the only one that drove input into the decision making. So I think if you have result focus that comes from accountability, that comes from commitment, that comes from ability to mine for conflict and have other ideas, that comes from vulnerability-based trust, then you have ingredients for success. But you have to, and I think a good leader has to assume that they have to be willing to say, I'm sorry. They have to be willing to change their mind, but at the same time, it cannot be around consensus driving, right? If they think that their mission is to get everyone to agree every time, then you're going to fail. It's going to take way too long, right? But having clear decision makers, having the ability to get input and then disagree or commit, or agree and commit, and then we all aligned and we run at it. If you balance those two out against each other, that's where I think you get a healthy culture. You often also provide the right circumstances for people to scale within your company and not be stuck somewhere. And you're gonna get that multitude of input, but still drive fast enough, right? Which is the best criteria for good decision making.
Thank you so much. And now towards the next chapter of finding the right people. So Ida, if we start with you, do you have any tips or guidance on how to source candidates, or what do you use to do that?
It's always good to get lucky. Just meet like the dad of somebody in your kindergarten or the mom. But often you have to pay a recruiter to find people who are outside your network, maybe outside your town or outside your country or your sector. I don't know, you try one recruiter, it went kind of well, and you try them again, and then that didn't go so well, and then you try a new one. And then you look at the price, and you're like, is this for real? Like, it's so expensive. So you try one that was a little cheaper, and that didn't go well, you go back to the expensive one. I mean, I don't think there is like a... but I think when I source recruiters, you try and find somebody where you're like, yes, you get us. Like, you understand the soul of who we are. So that you can find other people that will resonate with that. And then you, of course, just like blast to the world, if possible, internally. Like, we're looking for this person. And I have enjoyed trying to really go kind of radical in the beginning of the funnel, make the funnel really wild, and have really outliers as well. Interview people where you're like, this is kind of odd, but let's try it. Because I feel honestly, it is also a process of like honing in on what do we actually need. And so, poor candidates out there that you interview before you really, really know what you're looking for. But I think, honestly, that is part of the sourcing, is that you feel your way a little bit into the field.
You're maybe working on a definition of what you need a little bit in the process.
Yes, it gets clearer. And also, at least the way we were hiring in Clue, or are hiring, it's like a group effort. Somebody will own it, but you will have conversations with your team, the ones that maybe will be reporting up to the person you're hiring, or the other way, and you kind of have a collective learning process as well, figuring out what do we really need. Again, with the caveat that sometimes you can't do that in the organization as much as you would like to, because you might gonna step a little bit on somebody's toes, or somebody's about to leave and the organization doesn't know maybe quite yet, or like depending on where you are in the hiring process. So, but if possible, make that early part of the process a learning process for a writer team.
And Chris, how about interviewing techniques?
Well, yeah, interviewing in general, right? I think there's a bunch of points there. One is to make sure that you have people that will be reporting to that person, people that they will be reporting to. That will often be the CEO if it's an executive team, of course, right? And then peers as well. So you make sure that you get that. And I would also do references. I think that's extremely important. Often we can get infatuated with a candidate and they seem like a perfect fit, right? But doing references is a must, right? I think that's really important. And again, you want to do all three levels. I think the notion of when you want to know something, ask a little deeper. For example, let's say diversity is important to your organization. There's not going to be a candidate, if you ask them, is diversity important to you, that will say no. But what you can say is like, oh, when you're building your team, how do you source for diversity? Can you show me examples? What did you do before? That will give you a much better indication. Another thing could be use your advisors and your investors, right? You might have someone on your board or someone in investment that's fantastic at closing a candidate, right? Or use them for that. Or you might have someone that's really deep technical on product. Have them do an interview to qualify for it, right? Very often, those can also be people that the candidate wants to meet, right? Because they want to network with them as they grow up executives. So you can use that as a sort of almost as an incentive to go through the process. And then there's other parts of this, like we were talking about sourcing, right? Where I think it's very important, coming back to diversity, when you do everything you can for sourcing candidates, everyone jumps through the same hoops. At the end of the day, you're going for the best candidate, but you can also, for example, shift up if it's a technical role. Statistically speaking, women are 40% less likely to do a project, a take-home exercise or something like that, some sort of demonstration of their skills after only one interview. So maybe you want to more invest up front in having some cultural interviews there as well. Everything's going to be the same at the end of the day, but the order of which you do things, because of course, as an employer, you want to use as little as time to go through candidates as possible, right? But you weigh that up against getting as many qualified, diverse candidates through the funnel as possible, right? So I think there's a lot of things you can do that. And then maybe lastly, you make sure that your values are instrumented in a proper, clear way, and that anyone interviewing knows how to interview for it. And then maybe very lastly, not everyone should necessarily be interviewing for the same things, right? And so you can delegate out responsibilities, and we very often do that because you want to go deep with a candidate. So if we all spend our 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes asking the same questions, we're not going to learn enough. And so in our team, we're fairly well integrated. We know what each other do well. So we sort of slice it a little bit out. So what I'm interviewing for in a CFO is not going to be the same as my co-founder interviews for. And so that way we piece together the feedback afterwards for getting a more complete picture.
I want to add a few things, if I may, real quick. I would say listen to your body when you interview people. Your body will give you a lot of information, like is your stomach cramping up as you speak to people? Are you getting impatient? Do they make you laugh? Like I would really, it's a skill to actually listen with your whole body when you interview people. And it's kind of a superpower. I tell you, there's a lot of information that you pick up through your body that you just need to kind of get with your brain. I love the question I ask people, what makes you angry? It tells so much about people, how they respond to that. They're like, oh, I never had that question before. And some people will say, oh, the big injustices in life, like in the world, that really gets me angry. Or some people will say, like, if somebody is like, say they're going to do something and they don't do it, I get angry. Like, it says so much about what scale people are thinking. Not the one is better than the other. You might be looking for really detail-oriented people, and then that's what you want to look for. But it also says something about maturity and how people can reflect and how open they might be to work through challenging things. So I love that question. And then lastly, I'd say, ask people how they did things. You can look at the CV and they did some amazing project. Walk me through, like, what did you do on the first day of the project? How did you know it was a success? Like, whatever you want to really know, dive in on the how. These are 3 things that I think are good: body, anger, and how.
Great advice, thanks. How about you, Kasper? How do you deal with this?
Well, the first question was around how do you find them, as in recruiters or not recruiters. You touched a bit upon it. I think recruiters, just like PR agencies, sometimes it's a bit like lunch providers. You get like really amazing food the first 2 weeks, and then you get leftovers after that. Meaning that it's important to understand that when you run these processes, and I do think you need recruiters for this, like I'm a big fan of doing things with intent. So like either you do it or you don't do it. Like this kind of like, let's try and hire a CFO for like a 1.5 year process is really annoying.
Did I say that?
No. But so, the good thing about recruiters is that they make you go for it. But they won't do all of your job. You need to do the spec, you need to do the interviewing. I very much agree with the points here. And then set the boundaries. And then just remember that recruiters, they essentially have a perverse incentive to make you pay more for the candidate than you want to pay. So think about it up front, particularly hiring C-level people.
Exactly. And over to when you have found somebody that you would like to hire, how do you really close the deal or, get them on board? If I go over to you, Christian, how do you incentivize employees?
Well, I mean, like again, using investors and others to close it can be important. Like if you have, so one of our investors have a large back office and executive recruiters that can help with salaries and bands and so on. But otherwise, your incentives can be some sort of bonus or commission structure, right? You have sign-on bonuses or result-based, performance-based bonuses. And then, of course, you have your salary and you have equity, right? And early on, you want them incentivized in the company's success as much as possible, right? So very often, founders will want to prioritize equity, right, and options. And of course, it's important that there's a vesting scheme. Typically, that's monthly vesting over 4 years with a 1-year cliff. So you have a chance to get to know each other. But yeah, I would normally want to really sell them on the mission as well, because I think it's dangerous if someone comes in and they ask me too much around the benefits and so on. I get it, right? Benefits needs to be competitive, but it's a table stake, it's a hygiene factor. It needs to be there, and let's talk about something else. If I feel like they're coming in for the compensation directly and less around the mission, I worry, right? Am I going to get the best of them? And so I want to make sure that they are mission driven. I want to sell heavily on the mission, and that should equate that once we're ready to close, equity should be most important, because they're going to believe that we're building something huge here, and that's going to be much more valuable than monetary compensation here and now, right? So I think putting that into play and using the people around you, including your advisors, investors, to help close is super important, right? And then also, they want to know that they're set up for success, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's part of the closing, being able to define what success will look like and making that obtainable for them, right? Giving them a clear path towards victory.
And Kasper, how do you do this? Can you give us any practical tips about incentivization?
Practical tips. I mean, I can tell you a little bit about how we kind of came about it. So now we talked about finding the right people. I think just to wrap that one up, like it's a sales job to hire leadership people or exec people. Of course, you need to find and filter. But the best ones I've hired over the years, it was me doing the selling, in the sense that, the best ones are not the ones that just, sitting around on a bench and waiting to get a job. The best ones is the one out there doing it. So A is sales, and I think the really good people, of course, I very much agree that compensation is like hygiene to some degree. Of course, it needs to be there, but people are buying into the mission, and that's where your warrants or option schemes or whatever you have plays a big factor. We tried very early on to do like open salary policy. We had a spreadsheet where everyone could go in and see not the exact salary, but like what would someone in CS that has this years of experience make, and so forth. And it was actually pretty cool in the beginning because everyone felt equal. Then you get into labor laws and whatever as you cross country, and it gets a lot less easy to manage. But I do think, and then we scrapped the sort of spreadsheet for practical reasons, unfortunately. But we kept the principle saying that if you cannot stand up on all hands and publicly sort of defend a salary, you have a problem. I don't mind paying someone a lot of money. I actually think a lot of early stage companies do the mistake of not being ambitious enough for the early leaders. And that should not be mixed up with hiring someone straight out of a big company, because that doesn't necessarily work. But hiring someone that has seen what's sort of ahead of you on the journey and still have the hunger to kind of become the C-level maybe down the road or something like that. So I think hiring like super ambitious is a big key, and therefore sometimes you need to pay a lot of people. Not a lot of people. You may need to pay some people
a lot of money,
a relatively high salary compared to the company. But I mean, we hired a CRO early on. He was extremely expensive compared to the rest. But I think I could have stand up every month on all hands and defended his salary for 5.5 years because he changed the company. So it's all relative.
So how about you, Ida? How do you convince people your mission?
So one thing I did, and this was early, I told them how much I earned, and I said, you're going to earn the same. That's as much as I can do. And it wasn't that much. But it was kind of convincing because, it's like, what more can I do? I mean, now, later, you actually probably hire somebody that's more expensive than the CEO, and you can't do that. But at that time in the company, that felt like a really genuine way to say, that's kind of the upper bar. And then I would say, maybe even say, I know that we cannot compete on prices. You can go somewhere else and earn more. And actually offer less. But say, but your learning journey will be great. We're gonna have all the strategic conversations together. I'm gonna have a kind of leadership that will really include you. You're gonna have amazing peers. You can add so many, or you can create an organization that give people something that nourishes their souls and their cultural needs and their friendship needs, and they can be kind of whole humans. I had people who say, I always felt I could only be half myself at work, and then after work I could be my other half, and here I can be myself. That's worth a lot. Or people say, I love the mission. Like I've worked so many years for things that I didn't really care about, and here I really care about this, and they will take a pay cut to do that. So all the good stuff, don't underestimate. We're humans, like we need stuff that we like, other than money.
Just to wrap up, because I love the disagreement. So first of all, when I say like it's pay the money, it doesn't mean paying them more than where they are now. I also think everyone we hired came in below where they were before because they believed in the mission, and that's where the sales job come in and sell the opportunity for yourself and the company. We started up having 3 salary ranges. You could either earn 3, 4, or 5,000 euros, and 3,000 for graduates, interns, 3, whatever it was.
I was really underpaid. Damn.
It worked for a while, and then at some point it breaks, right?
Yeah, maybe just add as well. So our the first GP at Andreessen Horowitz did our Series A, and Peter Levine, and he gave me the best advice I've ever gotten from an investor, which was early on. Of course, later on when you're going to growth stage, you're going to have a people team. They're going to do market analysis, and you're going to have salary bands, and you're going to sit in a certain percentile, and all of this is much more calculated. But you don't have that early on. And he just said, like, if you're not sharing, your equity and total compensation packages, just imagine that everyone comes into the office one morning and everyone can see what everyone else makes, all inclusive, on a whiteboard. No one should feel screwed. In other words, they're not going to make the same, but you need to be able to argue why there's a difference, right? Sure, I mean, if you use some like arbitrary ATS, deep infrastructure stuff, and there's like 3 engineers in the world that know how to maintain it, that's a really scarce resource, and for that you have to pay more, but people would understand that if you told them, right? So the notion of thinking through it like that, because if it becomes too discretionary and your only answer is because they asked better than you asked for it, that will cause a lot of heartache, and in those situations it always travels. Someone finds out somehow, right? And you don't want that to happen at all. So think about the whiteboard exercise until, of course, you actually get salary bands and so on, which is going to be later on.
And then moving to the last batch of questions about how to make people successful in your organization. If you start with you, Ida, how do you define success and how do you measure it?
The first thing is to recognize when you have made a hiring mistake and do them the favor to get them out again with their heads high and be like, owning your mistake, be like, okay, we actually didn't get it clear what the role was about, or something's not working, and then get them out. I think that's the first thing. And then, well, you ask the whole organization, is this working? I had something I called skip level meetings. So every week I would have a random selection of people from across the organization. I put them in a room and I asked them, tell me what's working in the organization, tell me what's not working. That's a great way to figure out if you have made hiring mistakes. And when you see successful people, or like people being successful, and then give feedback, develop a really good culture for feedback, so that if something is not working, it will never come as a surprise if you have to let them go, but also you can help them be successful. And how do you know if people are successful? Well, you ship things, you build things, people don't leave when they are being managed by this person. You feel good in your body. That's actually one thing I want to say, which I think is important. As a founder, you need to hire people that make you good. Somebody who can play to your strengths and weaknesses. Make sure that you hire somebody who doesn't want you to be a different kind of leader than you are or want to be. So if you are not successful as a CEO with your management team, something is not right. So that's also a measure of success. If you are actually, enjoying having all the many meetings and conversations and discussion you're going to have with this group of people.
Thanks. And Christian, how do you make sure that the management team grows with the organization? And when they can't grow, maybe to continue on what Ida was talking about. How do you deal with this?
Absolutely. I think that what you want to do is you want to obviously set them up for success, right? So first you hire people that are smarter than you are, and then you give them real responsibility, right? You have to trust them. You have to delegate to them, right? trust them to do their jobs, coming in as executives, and then hold them accountable, right? Real responsibility comes with real accountability, right? And I think that's something delegation is hard. When you start a company, you do everything, right? You're the janitor, you're the CEO, you're everything in between as well, right? So being able to delegate is always a challenge, but it's really important. And I think when you delegate and you want true accountability, that will only come if they have a very clear definition of what success looks like. So, like, have concrete KPIs, have very concrete OKRs. There's this, OKRs came out, and then we had this Google thing of going for 70% stretch goals and so on, and I think that's quite problematic, because what 30% aren't you doing? And you think that those OKRs are completely self-contained and isolated between the different parts of your organization. At least if you're product-led growth dependent, which we are, like product-led company, you're absolutely gonna fail, right? They're all part of a greater story. And so this idea of stretch goals, well, are they the same stretch? I mean, are we preparing something over engineering that marketing is no longer gonna be pushing, right? So I don't believe very much in that. I do believe, however, in creating clear, obtainable goals, and then making sure that everyone is in lockstep as where we are in obtaining them throughout the quarters, right? But yeah, delegate true responsibility, and make them accountable by defining what success truly looks like.
And over to you, Kasper. As the company grows and you have more managers and you have a bigger organization, how do you make it work, and how do you make decisions work?
Yeah, as I think one of the advices I got from a good friend had scaled a company. I asked him, what do you wish you would have done different? And his answer was to keep my management team horizontal, he called it. But essentially, I think it's very, very key when you build leadership teams that team becomes a team. In normative, we talk about it as sort of first team, like what's your first team? If I'm the CMO, is it the marketing team or is it the leadership team? And that always have somewhat of a conflicting thing, but I think when leadership teams really, really work, it's because the leadership team works together. So you make decisions to the benefit of the company and not just my team. And it sounds very banal, but it kind of works. So I'm like a big fan of operating mechanisms in general. I think it's something many companies underestimate, like when do we have our meetings, how long are they, when do we have our board meetings, do we have offsites, do we invest in personal sort of interaction time for the leadership team and all of that stuff. And it's actually not very hard. If you try and write it down, you can very quickly see if you're doing it all backwards. But optimizing on that sort of operating mechanism and make sure you invest in the personal relationships in your leadership team to make sure they are a team.
Any last words?
Ida disagrees.
Yes, I have a last, or maybe second last word, I don't know. But I would say I've found that whenever people go through their kind of career journeys in the organization, usually they bounce up against something at some point. And in my experience, it's always something internal, something private, something personal, something in their childhood that comes up, whatever it is. And the people who have the willingness to really look at these sore spots, they grow with the organizations. The ones where it's like something gets too uncomfortable, too taboo, something, they get stuck, and somehow over time they will either manage themselves out of the organization or you will have to let them go. So hiring for somebody and then be like, are these people willing to do their own inner work as well? Are they willing to grow as people? I think that's a really important thing to hire for if you are in an organization that's going to change a lot. Yes, hire for maturity and mental health, if you can.
Hey.
Maybe my last would be have fun, right?
Have fun.
You're so mission-driven, and you're building a company of mission-driven people, and you all care way too much to also have fun while doing it, right? So find people, surround yourself with people that also have fun. Laugh, you know.
Let's all go and have fun.
It's
tough. That's one.
It's a mix between terror and euphoria many times a day. That's the life of being an entrepreneur and being an executive in a startup, right? But underneath that, it should still be fun.
Let's do that.
I feel we have to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
And good luck.